Alrighty, so the Fed thinks that we're entering a mild recession. You feel better, I feel better. Isn't it great? The Fed thinks that the recession that they now believe we are heading into will be mild. This comes from the Fed minutes, which were taken during the last Fed meeting, and of course I always cover those on the day of the meeting because we have the big Fed press conference and the Fed's official statement. We get the minutes later on, and so now we have those minutes, and it shows that many participants and staff at the Fed believe we are going to enter recession in the latter half of 2023. We're now in the second quarter of 2023, so that means, like Q3 or Q4, a matter of months. The Fed thinks we're entering a recession. Now, this is not significant because I so greatly respect the Federal Reserve's opinion. Far from it. The Fed are the guys who always think that everything is great and that everything they do just makes the world a better place. The Fed is never, even if they see these things coming, they don't tell us about it. They don't say it publicly. They don't publish, hey, we think that there's going to be a recession. Remember before the 2008 financial crisis, what was Ben Bernanke's famous quote? Oh yeah, subprime is contained. And as we all know, subprime was most certainly not contained. It almost brought down the entire global financial system, i.e., the whole Western economy. We were on the cusp of an economic cataclysm, and the Fed said everything was hunky-dory. Now the Fed is saying, yeah, there's probably going to be a mild recession. Alarm bells should be going off. If the Fed thinks there's going to be a mild recession, you can be assured that in reality, whatever's coming will be much worse. If I had to venture a guess, the bank collapses that we've had in the past month, was it? Those likely are not the end of the problems with the banking system. I know, very controversial take. I know that everyone has the utmost faith in our banking system and that I'm definitely way out of line, but hear me out. I think that some banks may run into trouble. Just throwing that out there. Now, I could be totally wrong. The banks might be more safe and secure than they have been at any point in American history. That's possible. I just think that it's highly improbable given the facts. Given that interest rates were on a downward trajectory for 40 years, and in particular from 2009 to 2022, the Fed funds rate had been hovering around zero. Sure, it briefly rose, what was it, around, like 2018, and then stayed there until 2020. But it never got anywhere near back to, normalization. And interest rates across the real economy didn't rise substantially. Interest rates everywhere stayed low, and if they weren't low, they got lower over the past decade. That has been the environment in which all of these banks have been operating, a low interest rate environment. So they are loaded up on low yielding assets, all of which have been greatly devalued as a result of the rapid rise in interest rates over the past year plus. When interest rates rise, the value of fixed rate assets, such as treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities, fall substantially. And the longer that rates remain high, the more damage is done. Now, personally, I don't think that rates are going to remain high for long. The yield curve is already on inverting. Rates are already coming down. And I think that is, there's a lot of ways to explain the bond market. But the way I look at it, what I see, what I read in those tea leaves, is the market forecasting the Fed having to completely reverse all these rate hikes and bring rates back down to zero, if not negative. Now, the Fed in the past has assured us that they'll never have negative interest rates. I hope that's the case, but you never know. But let's just assume that Jerome Powell is telling the truth and that, he will never be forced to send interest rates negative. That still gives the Fed, like 500 basis points in which they can cut. I'm fairly confident that we've seen the last rate hike. Although at this point, as far as most people are concerned, another 25 basis point rate hike is not out of the question. Either way, the consensus seems to be clear that the worst is yet to come. Now, I almost completely forgot. We got a CPI print today. Year-over-year CPI is down to 5%, which is still really, really bad. It's down from, what did it peak at, like 6.5%? And now people are going, oh, this is great, now CPI is down. It's like, the CPI is 5%. 5% CPI, anyone would have considered that ridiculous. Only a few years ago. But now, of course, 5% CPI is celebrated. Anything that can be used as an excuse to buy stocks, am I right? And month over month, it was a 0.1% rise from, I guess that was the month of March, yeah. Now, if inflation is coming down, I can tell you there's one reason for it. It's not because the federal government is cutting spending. I can tell you that. Because the federal government most certainly is not cutting spending. So that source of inflation is still there. So where could this gap in inflation over the last couple of months, what could be causing it? I'll give you 3 guesses. You know what? No, I'm not even going to let you guess. The economy is slowing down. We're entering a quote-unquote mild recession. Mild recession is the new transitory inflation. I hope you folks understand that. We were told that inflation would be transitory years ago. Guess what? We've still got inflation. It's 5%. That's really bad. And we're told to celebrate it. But don't worry, at least it's transitory. I hope the recession is transitory too. Transitory and mild. I hope we can all celebrate and we're all going to buy stocks. When we find out that the recession only lasted for 3 quarters. Because a 3-quarter recession is much better than a 4-quarter recession, am I right? And so, if we are to expect inflation to continue to drop, it's going to come at the cost of economic activity. Because we don't have a true vibrant economy. Our economy is pretty much pure inflation. The only reason why we have positive economic growth is because the Fed understates the real rate of inflation. GDP growth, in actuality, is negative in this country. Supposedly, we're told the country keeps getting richer and richer every year, yet people feel poorer and poorer. That's not the case. If you calculate inflation correctly, we are getting poorer and poorer. Our economy is shrinking. We don't have real economic growth. We have growing inflation. And so the inflation number has to be doctored in order to... So with that said, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.